Hey guys, thanks for joining me today as you journey through this arduous process of mastering reading comprehension for your college entrance exam. Today we're going to be talking about, in this preview lesson, expository passage types. Expository passage types are passages that you would normally see probably when you read magazines like National Geographic or Smithsonian. They tend to be scientific in nature, and the reason why is they tend to focus upon an inquiry or a general inquiry. The author is curious about something. And because the author has that inquiry, your first point that you want to really be able to determine is, what is that inquiry? Your next task is to identify all of the supporting factual findings that feeds into the inquiry. And obviously, after the inquiry has been identified and all the facts have been laid out, the author will then proceed to provide us with meaningful or insightful commentary so that we can really understand what the author's viewpoint or the opinions may be. And that's really the basic gist of tackling expository passages.
I got confused. I misunderstood when I did it. I said,
hey guys,
this was...
Now, expository passages also, just like all the other passage types that we had covered in our previous lessons, including narratives and historicals, expository passages require a strategy. Expository passages also have usually a set of data that will come with the passage. And they'll present this to you with charts or pie graphs or Venn diagrams that will give you some information, and you'll definitely have a question or two that you'll have to answer based upon that data set that they provide for you. So make sure that when you encounter expository passages, make sure that you take the proper amount of time, and it shouldn't take you too long, but make sure that you do so to understand the proper axioms and the values and or the increases in rates or changes that the questions will definitely follow. All right. Okay, to recap, expository passages, when you encounter them, they tend to be generally scientific passages. And furthermore, you want to identify the inquiry or the general inquiry that the author poses, and then from there identify the factual findings that feeds into that inquiry that ultimately will lead to the author's commentary and or something insightful that you will learn about, usually towards the conclusive portion of that passage. All right? All right, one other note that I want to make to you is this idea of paraphrasing. Paraphrasing is something that we here at Pittsburgh Prep really take seriously. Paraphrasing involves what we call blueprinting, this skill set of being able to identify what the author is saying, not what you are saying. Remember, we talked about personal bias before, but you want to avoid your own personal opinions and focus entirely upon the author's words and scope. And once you get really good at being able to paraphrase or blueprint what the author wants you to take away, then you really are hitting a certain stride in being able to ascertain the main takeaways of each paragraph and therefore the entire passage. And this is going to take a little bit of time. At first, you may actually blueprint something entirely wrong. And I've seen this with many students in the past, and it's going to take you some time to readily admit that, you know what, my reading skill sets is deficient in this area and I need to improve. And once you recognize that area, and that usually involves recognizing the author's takeaways, not yours, and being able to say to yourself, aha, this here is in fact what the author wants me to focus on. This here is what the author is trying to emphasize and not what I think the author is trying to emphasize. When you focus on this area in the textbook, to double check your paraphrases and your blueprints with what we provide in our answers, and that they are nearly the same, okay? And try not to make excuses for yourself and or justify poorly written paraphrases, and by saying things like, oh, you know what, this is good enough or this is close enough, right? Don't do things half-assed? That's not the right word.
Partial.
Don't do things partially?
Lackadaisically.
Don't engage in your reading processes in a lackadaisical manner. Right? That's a really good vocabulary word. Yeah, like lazily, right? Don't do it lazily.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the right word.
Half-assed.
Yeah, half-assed.
Apathetic.
Don't tackle. That's too.
Carelessly. Half-heartedly.
Half-heartedly. That's it. Remember, don't tackle this area of reading half-heartedly. Don't justify your answers if it's not close enough. It's not close enough. Redo it and make sure by comparing your answers to our answers in the textbook that it is in fact as close as possible to what the author intended in the first place. Alright you guys, thanks for joining me for this preview lesson, and as you move forward in expository passages in lesson 4 of your textbook, really focus on what we had just talked about here. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in our next preview lesson as you tackle lesson number 5. Alright you guys, nice job.